My younger son, a pilot, called me. "Mom?" he said, his voice tight with an urgency I'd never heard before. "Something strange is happening. Is my sister-in-law at the house?" "Yes, she is," I replied, my hands still soapy from the breakfast dishes. "She's in the shower." His voice dropped to a frantic whisper. "That's impossible. I have her passport in my hands. She just boarded my flight to France." At that very moment, I heard footsteps on the stairs behind me. "I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my story of revenge from." I'm Stella, and this is Aunt Millie's Tales. I want to know how far this story has reached. This morning, just like any other, I was rushing to do the dishes after breakfast. My older son, Stephen, had left for his architecture firm early, leaving the house in that familiar, peaceful quiet. His son, my grandson Matthew, that clever little 7-year-old rascal, had already been picked up by the school bus. And Anna, my daughter-in-law, Stephen's wife, had just gone upstairs. Her soft, musical voice floated down to me. "Mom, I'm going to take a quick shower." "Okay, honey," I called back, smiling to myself. I had barely put away the last plate when the landline rang. I dried my hands on my apron and hurried to answer it. The cheerful, youthful voice of my younger son even filled the line. "Mom," I just wanted to say hi. I had some free time during a layover at the airport. Hearing his voice felt like a warm hug. Ivan is my pride and joy, a young co-pilot who's always on the move, living out the childhood dream he had of conquering the skies. I smiled and asked him a few questions about his flight, about how he was doing. He laughed heartily and said everything was great. That work was going smoothly. But suddenly, his tone changed, as if he was hesitant to say something. "Hey, Mom, something really weird just happened. Is Anna at the house?" I was puzzled. I looked toward the stairs, where I could still clearly hear the water running in the upstairs bathroom. "Of course she is, honey." "Anna is upstairs taking a shower," I replied, completely certain. Anna had talked to me less than 10 minutes ago, and she was wearing that simple white blouse she always wore around the house. How could I be wrong? But on the other end of the line, Ivan was silent for a long moment. So long that I could hear his sharp, anxious breathing. Then, his voice became very serious, laced with disbelief. "Mom, that's impossible. Because I have her passport right here, in my hand. She just got on my flight. We're headed for France." I laughed, thinking he must have been mistaken. "Oh, honey, you must have seen someone who looks like her." "I just saw Anna. She even told me she was going to take a shower." I tried to explain calmly, to reassure him, but he didn't laugh. He didn't answer with his usual easygoing charm. He told me in a slow, deliberate voice, as if he was trying to put the story in order in his own head, that after all the passengers had boarded, he ran out to look for some papers he'd forgotten and accidentally found a passport lying near the boarding gate. At first, he thought about giving it to the airport staff, but when he opened it to see who it belonged to, he froze. The photo was of Anna. Her name, Anna Brooks, was right there, clear as day. There was no way to get it wrong. My heart began to beat faster, a frantic bird against my ribs, but I tried to stay calm. "Are you sure, Ivan? That passport could be old, or maybe it belongs to someone else with the same name," I said, even though a tiny, sharp thorn of uneasiness had already pricked me. Ivan sighed, and his voice was now a mix of bewilderment and firmness. "Mom, I just went down to the passenger cabin to check. It's her. She's sitting in first class, next to a man who looks very rich and elegant. They were talking very closely, leaning into each other, like they were a couple." Ivan's words were like a physical blow. I stood frozen, gripping the phone receiver so tightly my knuckles ached. My head was spinning. A couple? Impossible. I had just heard Anna's voice from upstairs. I had just seen her in the flesh, in this very house. But right at that moment, the sound of the water in the bathroom stopped. I heard the bedroom door open, and Anna's voice drifted down the stairs. It was soft, but loud enough to make me jump. "Mom! Who is it?" I panicked. My heart was pounding so hard, I felt it was going to burst out of my chest. "Just a friend of mine," I replied quickly, my voice trembling. I hurried into the living room to avoid Anna's gaze as she peeked her head out from the top of the stairs, her dark hair still soaked and wrapped in a towel. I closed the door and whispered into the phone, trying not to let my nervousness show. "Ivan, I just heard Anna. She's here. She just finished showering. Are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" On the other side, Ivan fell silent again. And then, his voice became harsher, almost desperate. "Mom, it's impossible. I have her right in front of me, on this plane. I'm looking at her right now." I was speechless, my mind a complete blank. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking so much that I almost dropped the receiver. The living room, usually so bright and sunny, suddenly felt suffocating. I collapsed onto the couch, trying to take a deep breath, but my chest felt heavy with an impossible, terrifying question. If Anna was here, who was the woman on Ivan's flight? And if the woman on the flight was Anna, who was the person in my house? A few minutes later, Anna came down to the kitchen. She was wearing a clean, light blue dress, her hair still damp, and she smiled with the same sweetness as always. "Mom, I'm going to the market early today. Do you need me to get you any vegetables or anything?" Her voice was kind, familiar, as if nothing strange was happening. I looked at her, trying to force a smile, but inside, I felt as if I were carrying stones. "Yes, honey. Bring some tomatoes, please," I replied, my throat dry. Anna nodded. She took her wicker basket from the hook by the door and walked out of the house. Her silhouette disappeared behind the gate. I stood there, watching her go, with a whirlwind in my soul. I didn't believe Ivan was lying to me. My son had no reason to invent a story like this. He had always been an honest boy, very sensitive and affectionate with his family. But Anna, the daughter-in-law I had lived with for 7 years, was also in front of me, in the flesh. Unmistakable. I asked myself, could there be something I've missed? Is there some secret in this house that I, an old woman, have never noticed? I sat in silence in the living room as the midday sun filtered through the curtains, casting faint stripes of light on the tiled floor. The old armchair where I always sit to knit or read stories to Matthew also seemed heavier now. Ivan's call kept echoing in my head. Every one of his words was like a hammer blow to my heart. I looked around the room where the family photos hung. Stephen and Anna on their wedding day, newborn Matthew swaddled in blue, and Ivan's radiant smile when he first put on his pilot's uniform. All those happy memories now seemed covered by a haze, blurry and full of doubt. My name is Stella Brooks, a 65-year-old widow who lives in a quiet, middle-class neighborhood in Phoenix, Arizona. My husband, Raphael, passed away 10 years ago, leaving me with the 2 sons I love more than my own life. Stephen, the oldest, is a hard-working architect, always immersed in his blueprints and projects. Ivan, the youngest, is my pride for having made his dream of being a pilot come true. My life revolves around Stephen's small family, my daughter-in-law Anna, and my grandson Matthew, and the peaceful days in this house. Anna had always been the perfect model of a daughter-in-law in my eyes. She was beautiful, industrious, always impeccable, from the way she dressed to how she cared for Matthew. I still remember the day of their wedding, a lovely party held in the yard of her parents' house. Even though Anna's family wasn't wealthy, they put in their utmost effort to make everything perfect. Anna came into my house with a confident smile and a bright look, as if she had been born to be a wonderful wife and mother. I used to think how lucky I was to have a daughter-in-law like her. After Anna left for the market, I stayed seated, unconsciously gripping the edge of the tablecloth. Ivan's call made me re-examine small details that had seemed normal before. There were days when Anna would leave the house, saying she was going to the market or to see a friend, but when she returned, she seemed like a different person. One day, she was all sweetness, hugging Matthew and singing to him to put him to sleep. But on other days, she was in a bad mood and would yell at me just because I forgot to put the salt shaker back in its place. I used to think they were just the mood swings of a young woman. But now, I wasn't so sure. My heart was tied in a knot, as if someone was messing with all the memories I had cherished for so long. I remembered once, a few months ago, Anna took a pen to write the grocery list with her right hand. Her handwriting was very straight and neat. But the next day, I saw her using her left hand, and she was writing with more scrolls, as if she wasn't used to it. I asked her, "Since when do you write with your other hand, honey?" She laughed and quickly replied, "Oh, just for fun, Mom. I'm practicing." I nodded without giving it more thought. But now, that detail had become a sharp piece in my mind. I was lost in my thoughts when I heard the door open. Matthew ran in, his backpack bouncing on his back. He hugged me tightly, saying in his little chirping voice, "Grandma, the teacher complimented me today because I drew so well." I stroked his head, trying to smile, but I still felt a weight in my chest. Matthew sat down and pulled out his notebook to show me. "Grandma, look. Yesterday, my mom helped me with my homework with her right hand, and her writing was so pretty. But today, she wrote with her left, and it came out uglier." The boy pointed to 2 pages in the notebook, one with well-formed letters, and the other with crooked ones. I looked at the handwriting, and my heart sank. "Your mom must have been busy today. She was probably tired. That's why she wrote like that," I said, trying to hide my confusion. But Matthew looked up with his innocent eyes. "Grandma, my mom is so weird. Some days she hugs me really, really tight, but other days she doesn't even look at me." My grandson's words were another stab. I hugged him, trying to comfort him, but in my head, everything was starting to get tangled up. Just then, the doorbell rang. I got up, opened the door, and saw Mrs. Collins, my good neighbor, standing there with the plate that Anna had taken to her the day before. She smiled with her usual kind smile, but there was curiosity in her eyes. "Stella, your daughter-in-law is so nice, but yesterday I noticed she gave me the plate with her left hand, and you told me she's a righty, right? That's strange. Or maybe she uses both hands?" I forced a smile and replied, "Maybe so, Helen. Do you want to come in for some tea?" She nodded and came in, but her comment was like a thorn stuck in me. It wasn't just me. Even the neighbors had noticed the difference. That afternoon, I went out into the garden with the watering can, trying to let the water fall gently on the daisies I had cared for years. My soul could not find peace. The words of Matthew, of Mrs. Collins, and Ivan's firm voice on the phone kept circling in my head like pebbles thrown into a calm lake, creating ripples that wouldn't stop. I was watering the plants, but my mind wasn't there. I asked myself, am I too old now to notice the strange things happening in my own house? Or have I been turning a blind eye on purpose, wanting to believe in the happy family I always dreamed of? Anna returned from the market, carrying her wicker basket. But what caught my attention was that she was holding it with her left hand. I remembered perfectly that Anna always used her right hand, from how she held the knife to chop vegetables to how she combed Matthew's hair. I stood there, watching her, and a wave of suspicion was growing. At dinner time, the whole family gathered at the table. Stephen was tired after a long day at work, but he still smiled at Matthew. Anna ate slowly, delicately, and even turned to Stephen to remind him, "Honey, the parent-teacher conference is next week, so be sure to take the day off." I looked at her, trying to find the daughter-in-law I was so proud of, but in my head, Ivan's voice kept echoing. She's sitting in first class, next to a man. Just 3 days later, everything was different. Matthew dropped a glass of water, and the water splashed all over the tablecloth. I quickly grabbed a rag to clean it, laughing, "It's okay, honey." But Anna, sitting across from him, suddenly frowned and said in a sharp voice, "Matthew, why are you so clumsy?" I was stunned. Stephen also frowned. "Anna, it was an accident?" She turned with a spark of anger in her eyes. "You always defend him." The atmosphere became heavy. Matthew lowered his head, his eyes full of tears. I hugged him, feeling a deep pain. Only a few days ago, Anna had been so loving. Now, she seemed like a completely different person. These small differences, one by one, were piling up in my mind like the pieces of a puzzle I still couldn't see completely. One morning, I took an empty spice jar and went to Mrs. Collins' house. I knocked on the door, and she opened it with her usual kind smile. We sat in her kitchen. "Stella," she said, lowering her voice, "please don't get mad. Has your daughter-in-law's personality changed? One day she greets me so happily, but yesterday she passed by, and she didn't even acknowledge me." Her words were another stone in the troubled lake of my heart. I forced a smile. "She must have been in a hurry, Helen." But inside, I was a mess. On my way back, I passed by Mr. Johnson's bakery. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "your son's wife came in the other day." So nice. But this morning, she came back with a scowl on her face, bought the bread, and didn't even say thank you. I froze, gripping the handle of my purse. "She must have been tired, Joe," I replied, my voice trembling. When I got home, I sat on the porch. Suddenly, I saw her returning from her outing, greeting me in a dry voice. "Good afternoon, Mom." No smile. The blouse she was wearing today was navy blue, different from the white blouse she had on when she left. I tried to ask her, "Why did you change your blouse?" Anna paused for a second and then quickly replied, "Oh, I got a stain on it and had to change." She smiled halfway and hurried into the kitchen. I stayed there, with the teacup in my hands, feeling as if a rock was crushing my chest. That night, after cleaning the kitchen, I sat at the dining room table and took an old notebook out of a drawer. My hand was shaking as I wrote the first line. 3 p.m. Anna leaves for the market, returns 6 p.m. wearing a blue blouse. Irritable attitude. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending that nothing was happening. I kept writing. Yesterday, she sang to Matthew to sleep, tender. Today, she was cold, didn't sing. Each word was a heavy stroke, as if I was engraving my suspicions into reality. My old notebook was now full of notes about Anna. I couldn't keep all these thoughts to myself anymore. I needed someone to talk to. I immediately thought of Carol, my best friend since we were young. I picked up the phone, my voice trembling. "Carol, are you free this afternoon?" We met at the small coffee shop on the corner, a place that held so many of our shared memories. "Stella," she said, looking me straight in the eyes, "just looking at your face, I know something big is wrong. Come on, let it out." I took a deep breath and told her everything in a rush. Ivan's call, the passport, the identical woman on the plane, and all the small details I had written down. I took the notebook out of my bag and handed it to her. Look, I wrote it all down here. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but I can't be a fool anymore. Carol flipped through the pages with a frown. You've noticed everything, Stella, she said in a serious voice. Every time she leaves and comes back, it's like she's another person. What does your gut tell you? I shook my head, gripping the coffee cup. I don't know, Carol. I'm just scared. Scared that Anna is hiding something. Scared that my family will break apart if I dig any deeper. Carol put her cup on the table and looked at me with determination. Trust your gut. If you don't find out the truth, you'll always live with the doubt. Keep writing everything down, and if you have to, you're going to have to follow her. Not to hurt her, but to protect your family. I knew Carol was right, but the idea of following my own daughter-in-law made me feel as if I was betraying my family. On the weekend, Stephen left for work early, and Matthew was at a school activity, leaving the house quiet. Anna came down from her room in a pale yellow floral dress, looking as fresh as she did in her first days of marriage. Mom, I'm going to the market for a bit, she said. I nodded, smiling, but inside, a voice insisted, Follow her, Stella. Go find the truth. I didn't think twice. I took my old shawl, put it over my head to cover my face a little, and left the house in silence, keeping a safe distance behind Anna. She walked quickly, but instead of turning right toward the market, she turned left into an alley behind a working-class neighborhood. The houses were old, crammed against each other, with peeling paint and rusty tin roofs. I slowed down, my heart pounding, hiding behind some bicycles. Anna didn't look back. She went into an even narrower alley where the sunlight barely reached. I saw her stop in front of an old wooden door, knock softly, and then go in and disappear. I stood there, my breathing ragged, my head spinning. What was she doing there? I wanted to walk over, knock on the door, and ask her directly, but my feet seemed to be nailed to the ground. In the end, I turned around and went back home, full of questions. I had barely pushed the gate open when I froze. Anna was standing in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, with a white blouse on, completely different from the floral dress she had left in. She was frowning and looked at me with cold, sharp eyes. Where did you go, Mom? That you're just getting back? I stood frozen, my mouth dry, unable to say a word. Only a few minutes ago, I had seen her go into that alley in a yellow dress. How could she have gotten back so quickly? And this blouse? I stammered. I just went for a walk, that's all. Anna nodded without saying anything else, but her gaze sent a shiver down my spine. That night, Matthew ran into my room, sobbing. Grandma, my mom yelled at me just because I dropped a pencil. Not like yesterday. Yesterday, she was so nice, she even hugged me. I hugged him tighter, tears about to fall. My grandson's words were like a knife, engraving my suspicions even deeper. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with my eyes wide open. I took the notebook out of the drawer and wrote a sentence I didn't even dare to believe myself. Maybe they are not the same person. The next morning, I decided to go back to that alley. I couldn't bear the doubt anymore. I took the family photo that hangs in the living room, the one where Anna smiles radiantly next to Stephen and Matthew. I held it tight and left the house, determined but terrified. The alley was the same, silent and somber. I stopped next to a corn stand, where a middle-aged woman was fanning the charcoal. I showed her the photo and asked, "Excuse me, have you seen this young woman around here?" The woman looked at it closely and then pointed. "Oh, yes, of course. She comes and goes often from the house at number 14, that one over there." I thanked her, my heart pounding in my throat, and walked straight to that house. The house at number 14 appeared in front of me with stained walls and a peeling wooden door. I stood there, my hands trembling, feeling that the whole world was holding its breath with me. I knocked, and each knock sounded like a hammer blow to my chest. The door opened, and I was speechless. In front of me was a woman identical to Anna, from her face to her body to her long black hair. The only difference was her frightened look and her hands that were shaking as she held a rag. I stammered, my voice breaking. "Anna!" The young woman started, gripped the rag tightly, and tried to slam the door shut. But just then, another voice was heard from inside, soft but firm. "Isadora, don't hide anymore. You know this is wrong too." I looked up and saw a young woman come out of a corner of the room. She was thin, with her hair in a bun, and had an intelligent but kind look. She looked at me and smiled slightly. "My name is Lucy Miller, Isadora's roommate. Mrs. Brooks, please come in. It's time you knew the truth." I took a deep breath and went into that small, tin-roofed house. The walls were stained, the concrete floor was cracked, and a faint smell of disinfectant hung in the air. In a corner, an old man coughed weakly, lying on an old cot. The woman identical to Anna lowered her face, and her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. I'm not Anna. My name is Isadora." I looked at her, my mind a whirlwind. "You explain to me why you look so much like my daughter-in-law and why you show up at my house." Isadora looked up, her eyes full of guilt, but it was Lucy who began to speak. "Isadora is very poor, Mrs. Brooks," she said in a calm, clear voice. "Her adopted parents are very ill. A few years ago, Isadora met Anna by chance at a market. They looked like two peas in a pod, and Anna took advantage of that. She proposed that Isadora pretend to be her, that she replace her for a few hours whenever she needed to. Isadora didn't want to, but Anna paid her very well, and her family needed the money for medicine." I looked at Isadora, whose head was bowed, gripping the rag so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Replace her for what?" I pressed, my voice full of disbelief. "Why would Anna need someone to pretend to be her?" Isadora looked up, her voice trembling. "I don't know everything, ma'am." She would just tell me, "You just stay in the house for a few hours, do some things like go to the market, take care of the boy." And then she would give me money, a lot of money. She lowered her head, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. Every strange detail from the last few months suddenly made sense. Lucy continued. "Once, I saw Anna with a very elegant man. His name is Charles Thompson. I heard the name when they were talking at a coffee shop. They were calling each other honey, very affectionately. The name Charles Thompson was like a knife in my heart. I remembered Ivan's words. She's sitting in first class next to a rich man. The small room seemed to spin around me. Anna, is deceiving my family," I choked out. Isadora broke down, her voice choked with sobs. "I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted to save my parents." I looked at this young woman, with a face identical to Anna's, but with a look full of pain and regret. I wanted to get angry, but seeing Isadora, I only felt pity. "Isadora," I said, "do you know anything about your biological parents?" She shook her head. "I don't. But when I met Anna, I thought maybe she knew something. She never told me anything. I asked to see her old papers, hoping for a clue. Her adoptive mother, a frail woman in the corner, pointed to a dresser. Isadora took out a yellowish envelope. Inside, there was a copy of some hospital papers with Isadora's date of birth. I read them quickly, and my heart stopped. Isadora's date of birth was exactly the same as Anna's, the one I had seen on her papers when she married Stephen. I gripped the documents with trembling hands and looked at Isadora. You and Anna could be twin sisters," I said, my voice lost. Isadora broke down crying. "So Anna is my sister? Why didn't she tell me anything? Why did she make me do all that?" I looked at her, my heart shattered. I remembered the days when Anna came to my house, radiant and confident. I had loved her. But now I knew that she had not only deceived my family, but she had also taken advantage of her own sister. I stood up, put my hand on Isadora's shoulder, and my voice, though firm, could not hide the pain. "Isadora, from today on, I won't let anyone else take advantage of you. I'm going to help your parents with their illness, but in return, you have to cooperate with me. I need to bring this truth to light. For Stephen, for Matthew." Isadora nodded, still crying. "I will help you. I don't want to live in this lie anymore." That night, I called Ivan. My voice was firm, though my heart was trembling. "Ivan, you have to come home tomorrow night. There are some things I need you to clarify. And if you can, bring Anna's electronic passport." He didn't ask any more questions. He just said, "Yes, Mom. I'll be there." I hung up, feeling that the whole world was crashing down on me. I knew that tomorrow night would be one that no one in this family would ever forget. The next day, I got up early and prepared a big family dinner. I put a white tablecloth on the table, lit some candles. I cooked the chili that Stephen likes so much and the roasted fish that Matthew always asks for. Stephen got home as it was starting to get dark. "What are we celebrating, Mom?" he asked, surprised. I smiled, trying to seem calm. "I just wanted all of us to have a nice dinner." Anna came in with her light blue dress, a soft smile, but a bit of nervousness in her eyes. We sat down at the table. At first, the atmosphere was lively. Stephen talked about work. Matthew spoke excitedly about his school drawing. I took a deep breath and signaled to Ivan, who was waiting outside. He came in, and right behind him was Isadora, in a simple dress, her face identical to Anna's, but with a look full of anguish. Everyone at the table fell silent. Matthew looked confused from Anna to Isadora and asked innocently, "Why are there two moms?" Stephen turned pale, dropped his spoon, and Anna jumped up shouting, "What is this about, Mom?" I stood up, gripping the edge of the table. "Sit down, Anna," I said in a slow but firm voice. "I need us to clear everything up." I started telling the story, and each word tore me up inside. Ivan's call, her changing personality, my visit to the alley, and the discovery of the twins. "You and Isadora are twin sisters," I said, looking her straight in the eyes. "You took advantage of your sister to hide the truth. Tell us what the truth is." Anna trembled, her face as white as paper. She yelled, trying to defend herself. "She's making it all up to humiliate me." But Ivan walked over and put a stack of papers on the table with a thud. "This is a copy of your electronic passport with the entry and exit stamp from France," he said in a hard voice. "You can't be at home and flying to France at the same time." Anna looked at the papers, her lips tight. Matthew, sitting next to her, suddenly chimed in. "It's true, Grandma. Some days my mom is an angel, and other days she's really mean. I don't like the mean mom." Lucy, who had just come in, stood there and told everyone. "I saw Anna with Charles Thompson. They were calling each other honey." Stephen turned to his wife, his voice choked. "Is it true, Anna? Tell me." Anna bit her lip and then suddenly yelled, her voice full of fury. "Yes, it's true. I have a lover. I'm sick of this poor life. I'm sick of being the daughter-in-law in this house. Charles gives me a life 100 times better. And you, Stephen, you're good for nothing." Her words were like a bomb that exploded in the room. Stephen froze, clenching his fists. Matthew broke down crying and ran to hug me, his voice trembling. I hugged him tightly, tears rolling down my cheeks. I looked at Anna, standing there with a cold look, without a shred of remorse. Isadora, who had been silent, suddenly spoke. "Sister, you didn't have to hurt them like that." Anna glared at her but didn't say anything. She just turned around and left. The door slammed shut, leaving the room in a painful, shattering silence. After that night, the air in my house felt like it had been robbed of life. The living room was now suffocatingly quiet. A week later, Stephen and Anna went to the courthouse for the divorce. "Mom," Stephen told me afterward, his voice dry. "She didn't look at me or Matthew. She signed the papers and left with that man, as if we had never existed." Anna didn't ask for custody of Matthew. My heart ached. Stephen fell apart. He became quiet, buried himself in his work, or sat watching Matthew play in the yard. I wanted to hug him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I didn't know where to start. Fortunately, Isadora appeared, a small light in the darkness. She came to the house every day. She brought containers of warm food, sat down to play with Matthew, and wiped away his tears when he asked, "Auntie, where did my mom really go?" I looked at Isadora, saw that face identical to Anna's, but with a completely different heart. She was sweet, patient, and always found a way to make Matthew laugh. One afternoon, I saw Matthew run to hug Isadora. "Mom, Isadora, teach me how to draw a little bird." I was surprised, my heart tight. The boy was calling her Mom, with a carefree smile I hadn't seen in a long time. Isadora laughed and stroked his head. I stood there, tears rolling down my cheeks. One night, Stephen called me to the living room. He was standing there, holding a small ring, his hands trembling. Isadora was by his side, her face flushed. Stephen knelt, and his voice broke. "Isadora, you brought light back to me and Matthew. Would you accept to be my wife and Matthew's mom?" Isadora broke down crying, looking at me as if seeking my approval. I walked over, took her hand, and nodded gently. "You deserve it, honey. You've been part of this family for a long time." She hugged me, her tears soaking my shoulder, and I knew that was the moment my family was beginning to heal. Stephen and Isadora's wedding was soon after. Something small, but full of love. I was in the yard, looking at the red roses, listening to Matthew's laughter as he wore his little suit, being his dad's tiny best man. Ivan flew back and stood next to his brother, his smile as radiant as ever. I sat in the front row, tears of happiness rolling down my cheeks. I looked at Isadora in her simple wedding dress, holding Stephen's hand, and I knew that my family had found a sincere heart. Isadora maintained her simple life, taking care of Stephen and Matthew with all her love. She cooked warm meals, sang Cielito Lindo to Matthew to sleep. Matthew no longer asked about his other mom. He just snuggled with Isadora, calling her Mom with a radiant smile. One late night, I sat on the porch. The wind blew softly. Matthew's laughter could be heard from inside, mixed with Isadora's sweet voice. I peeked in and saw Stephen concentrating on his work, while Isadora prepared a cup of tea for him, placing it beside him and giving him a soft kiss on his forehead. I smiled, feeling my heart finally at peace. The truth had been cruel, but as my husband Raphael used to say, "The truth will set you free, Stella." And so it was. The truth set us free. It brought us Isadora and gave us a new beginning, much brighter and happier.